Frequently, when we play first move e4 and black plays g6, we don't know what opening they want to play. So we go d4. Now black has choices to go. Actually, they will play bishop g7, and they will have choices after our knight c3 to try to get to accelerated dragon by playing c5, to try to go to perk defense by playing d6, or play c6 intending to play some kind of Gurgenidze system or modern defense by playing d7, d5. So on c6 we play knight f3, and now we see that black can play d6, and we will go a4, and we see this is clearly variety of the Pirc defense. So we will cover this variation in Pirc when knight f6, black plays knight f6, we play h3 followed by bishop e3. This is typical Pirc. So we are not going to cover the d6 move. So we can look at d5 move. This is clearly the Gurgenidze system, or you can call it modern defense. We will go h3. Now, purpose of this move is to stop black from playing bishop to g4. So what black wants to do here is a clear strategy for black is to get the pawn structure in its center, c6, d5, and e6, and getting rid of their light square bishop. Obviously, they don't want to lock out light square bishop by playing e6, so they may want to play bishop g4. That's what h3 move is designed against. After h3, black has two choices practically that make any sense. If they go e6, what would I do? I mean, we just follow what we know about chess. We just try to get quick development. Maybe bishop e3, bishop e2, queen d2, castle, and black has bad bishop on c8. So moves that make sense are only knight f6 or d takes e. So in this position, let's look them in random order. Let's play d takes e. Black will play knight takes to e4. And here white will play knight takes to e4. And here black has choices again to develop knight f6, or maybe knight d7 preparing knight f6, or maybe even bishop f5. Bishop f5, I think, is the weakest of the choices because on bishop f5 we can simply play knight g3, and now black will not want white to play knight takes f5. Now they have to make second move with the same bishop. Bishop would go to e6, and we just continue development, maybe bishop e3, queen d2, and castling long, or even just to play simply bishop e2, or even c3, and then bishop d3, castle long. It's a simple position. White is developing, putting rook on open file. White has slight advantage. Okay, so but if bishop f5 is not to be played by black, then they have two other choices, knight f6 and knight to d7. They have to conclude development. On knight f6, we will play knight takes f6. This is not recommended way to play for black. Now, if they take with a pawn, we will simply play bishop c4, followed by castling and putting rook on e1. I don't think the doubling f pawns for black can be justified. We just play simple chess. We castle, then we play bishop e3, queen d2, put rooks on open files, and we are doing just fine. But taking with the bishop on f6 after knight takes f6, bishop takes f6 is not very good for black either, because white will play bishop h6. Now white will simply play queen d2 castle long, or even bishop c4 and castle short. Meanwhile, black has really problem deciding what to do with their king. For example, on bishop f5, we can simply play bishop d3, well, exchanging bishops, and white now is absolutely free to castle either side, and black is having difficulties concluding development, having nothing in exchange for it. So knight f6 may be a premature move for black. So suppose they play knight d7. Now this move makes sense. Now black wants to play knight f6, and after white exchanges knights, at least they can conclude development and castle. Well, here is the way we can play to achieve simple and a stable advantage. It's not a big advantage, but it's advantage for white. Bishop c4. Now black is playing expected move knight f6. We simply take on f6. Black is gonna take with the knight, and white is gonna castle. Black is gonna castle, and white is gonna put rook on e1. This position is simply better for white. The reason is black has difficulties developing the light square bishop. The only square this light square bishop can go to, obviously black doesn't want to play e6, locking out this bishop. Only square light square can go to is f5. Well, then if we can simply play bishop f4 or bishop g5 or even c3. So what is black gonna do next? Black has a problem choosing the plan. We go c3. Suppose black goes queen d7 move. You see, or even queen c7. Queen d7, we will play knight e5 with tempo. Suppose they play queen c7. Now, from now on, black will have to watch out for their light square bishop. What I mean by that is they will always have a problem pushing the e pawn by playing e6, so they will have to make sure light square bishop does not get in trouble. Okay, let's see how it will look exactly concretely. On queen c7, we may play move like knight e5. Now we putting little pressure on the f7 pawn. Suppose black go e6. Now we go g4, and we already won a piece. We already won black's bishop, because bishop has only one square to go to, e4, and then we go g5, and then you see knight that is protecting black's bishop is under attack, and if it moves, white will simply play, if knight moves, white will simply play rook takes e4. So that's why, so now black can never play e6. Suppose they play rook a to d8. We play queen to e2, getting away from d file, and followed by bishop f4. White has clear advantage. Black has always problem with their light square bishop. And you can notice that white has more space here, and plus they have clear advantage in piece placement. This position is definitely, unconditionally better for white. Now, going back to the position where black had a main choice between knight f6 and well, we're going to get to this position in a second. After e4 g6, d4 bishop g7, knight c3 c6, knight f3, d5. Now we went h3. So we just looked at d takes e. But that's not the main move. It's inferior move. The best move considered in this position to be knight to f6. Now white has choices to go e5 and bishop to d3. Well, I think both of these continuations give white some advantage. e5 move is most ambitious. After e5, black has only two moves that will make any sense. Knight h5 loses to g4, and you see the knight is trapped. And knight g8 would make no sense. We just continue development. Knight d7 will makes little sense, but also blocking the light square bishop and putting knight on the square where the other knight has to be developed is not such a great idea. And knight f6 was played. Main idea was to play knight e4, and this is the main move in this position. Well, there is one move, bishop d3 here, and what I like better is knight takes e4. Pawn takes e4, and now knight to g5. Now in this position, black pawn on e4 is hanging. Well, black is practically has to play c5 to attack, to create counterplay on white's central pawns. Move like bishop f5 is definitely not recommended because of g4 move. And see, and now if bishop goes away, then white simply is going to take the pawn. And if black plays h6, after g takes f, h takes g, and f takes g, black has completely ruined pawn structure. This is not to be played also. So this is not a good way to play. And f5 move is also not consideration because we can simply play e takes f en passant followed by knight takes e4. So the only move that makes any sense and the main move in this position is c5. And now we play d takes c. The move c3 is not recommended. I would not recommend because black has good counterplay here. After c takes d, knight c6, putting a lot of pressure on white's central pawns. So the move I would recommend is d takes c, and black has now two choices. To take, actually three choices. To take white's queen is one, to play queen a5 check and followed by queen takes c5 is the second move, and a third move to play queen c7. And now queen c7 looks like a most passive way to play, but amazingly it's the best way to play for black. Now let's look at two other continuations. On queen takes d1, this may be the worst. King takes d1, and now black is down a pawn, and they're going to have very hard time getting this pawn back because white's e5 pawn is hanging, but black's e4 pawn is hanging as well. For example, on bishop takes e5, knight takes e4. White is not castled, but that's not a big problem because white is going to play bishop d3 and king e2. Meanwhile, it's not clear how can black ever get c5 pawn back. For instance, if bishop f5, we go bishop d3, and if knight d7 attacking c5 pawn after bishop takes e4 and to play knight takes e, we can simply play bishop e3, and it's not maybe not bishop e3 right away. For example, here is what I meant. Bishop f5, we could go bishop d3, and on knight d7, now even if we go c3, and suppose black did get the pawn back, knight takes c5, we go bishop f3. This position is not good position for black to play, because we go king c2 later and go bishop e3. We have two bishops very well aimed on a queen side, and we have no weaknesses, and we have pawn majority on the queen side. White has some advantage. On top of that, we may try to contest black's idea of getting our pawn back. Well, for instance, in this position, on bishop f5, we can even play bishop b5 check. And now on knight c6, maybe we can try to go knight g3 or maybe pawn f3. And it's not that clear. Well, maybe we should take on c6 first. It's not that clear how black is going to get their pawn back. But the safest way, and the way I would recommend, and I would play on bishop f5, would be bishop d3. Knight d7, and I don't care if black gets their pawn back. Bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, knight takes c5, bishop to f3. It's clear advantage for white. For example, let's go a couple of moves longer. Castle check, king c2, knight d3. Black looks very active now, attacking on f2. We go bishop to e3. Now we protected f2. We attacking on a7, and we trying to play rook h to d1, and we have a pair of very strong bishops. Black's knight on d3 is unstable, and for example, if black plays some move like b6 or king b8 trying to protect a pawn, you see that knight has only one square to go to f4. For example, if we attack the knight, knight has only one square to f4. So if we go g3, he already has a problem to finding square for black's lone knight on d3. So this is the reason why queen takes queen is not not the recommended way to play. Again, we go to the position with knight on g5, pawn on e4, and knight and bishop on c8. So we just played d takes c and queen takes d1. We just said white has maybe small, maybe a little bigger than small, but clear and stable advantage. So let's look at queen a5 check. Now this move looks like the most logical, most obvious, that move that makes a lot of sense. Now we play bishop d2. Obviously black is going to take pawn on c5, and we play bishop to c3. Now what we want is to play simply knight takes e4 and get an extra pawn. If black plays e3 here in this position, well, here we can go f4. e3 pawn is not gonna live long, because we will go knight e4 or bishop d3 and queen e2. e3 pawn is not gonna last long. So what should, on the other hand, we try to play knight takes e4. Move like bishop f5 will be met by g4, and you see the same problem. just black had a little while ago. Bishop has to move, and then we take pawn on e4. So the move that can make sense, bishop takes e5, but now white has very simple, simplifying combination that gives them very clear advantage. White plays bishop takes e5, queen takes e5. All of a sudden now black has an extra pawn. Knight is hanging on g5, pawn is hanging on b2. But this position is bad for black, real bad, because white plays queen d8 check, king must take, knight takes f7 check, king to c7, and knight takes e5. What just happened here? We exchanged queens, we got our pawn back, we are a little better developed, which is not as significant in the end game, and we have big, maybe huge and decisive advantage in the pawn structure. Black has 4 pawn islands. 1, 2, 3, and 4. White has only 2. One on king side, one on queen side. Both e-pawns, doubled e-pawns, they're both very weak. I think objectively here black is lost. Well, let's try to make knight c6 move. Knight takes c6 and b takes c, or maybe even king takes c6. I don't think it makes the difference. For example, in this position, I will show you a very interesting strategical maneuver, very powerful and very typical for the endgame position. We will go here king d2. We don't want a castle because king d2 we are aiming to e3 square. This is beautiful outpost for white's king that can never be bothered, because black does not have pieces that can bother white's king on e3. e4 pawn will always be targeted, and on move like rook b8 we're going to go b3, and white has absolutely winning position. Well, that's what would happen if black played queen a5 check. So what we have to analyze now is the move that is the best, which is queen to c7. On queen to c7, it's a lot harder for white to get an advantage. We play knight takes e4, and on queen takes e5 we may play queen e2, or we we have to play queen e2, or maybe even bishop b5 check is better. This position is approximately equal what would a very easy play for white. On bishop d7 we play bishop takes d7, knight takes d7, and queen to e2. Now if black plays knight takes c5, we will have queen b5 check. That will give us some advantage. For example, on knight d7 we can play queen takes e5, not queen takes b7 because of rook b8, and on queen c6 f5. So we play queen takes e5, and after knight takes e5 we just play castle. The position is equal. Now what I'm trying to say here, that black has to play the best, the perfectly and only moves. Again, to summarize what we just talked about is e4 g6, d4, bishop g7, knight c3, c6, knight f3, d5, h3. The last move we've been analyzing, knight f6, e5, and knight e4. Now, if you play knight takes c4, de, and knight g5, as we just looked, and black plays perfect moves after c5, dc, and queen c7, you will get to the position where you have tiny bit of advantage, and in a worst case you will get the equal position. However, if you want to be a more ambitious and do not give black any chance for equalizing and try to be very aggressive, then you should go e5. This is second option for white. Knight e4, bishop to d3, knight takes c3. Those are, well, let's do it again. e5, knight e4, and instead of knight takes e4, now we make different moves. This is a very ambitious move. Bishop d3. Now, only move that makes sense here is knight takes knight. Well, some move like bishop f5 will be met by g4, and it's total waste of time. So knight takes c3, pawn takes c3. And now, for black, for example, is very dangerous to castle on the king side, because by playing h4 and h5, we may develop very strong attack. So, for example, h4, bishop g4. Now we're going to have hard time pushing h5, it looks like, but we may do it right away anyway. h5, and if bishop takes h5, then rook takes h5, pawn takes h5, and knight to g5. Now you see white has four powerful pieces attacking black's king. Knight on g5, bishop on d3, bishop on c1, and queen is coming to h5. For example, h6, queen takes h5. Now we have all kinds of threats here, including e6. White has very strong attack. This is very ambitious way to play for white, and again, this has to be analyzed further and a lot deeper than we are just covering right now. Well, the other option after castle h4, and if black goes f6, we go h5. And it's interesting to notice here that white's attack can develop very, very quickly. Let's look at some examples. Suppose black tries to keep position closed by playing g5. Now, not to open the h file. It's amazing how quickly white can get very strong threats, can create very strong threats. h6, bishop has to go to h8, bishop takes h7. Move that looks like makes no sense. King takes h7, queen d3 check, forces black to play f5, because after king g8, queen g6 check will be devastating. So f5, knight takes g5 check, king to g8, and now we can go h7 check, and after king g7, queen h3. You see, just few moves being made and black is getting mated. This is just one clear example of how dangerous that instant attack can be. Actually, in one of the variations of the pure defense, we have same type of attack when white plays queen d5 and queen e4 variations. We have h4, h5 as a possibility if you view the peer defense files.